Every morning, 12-year-old Mason dreaded walking through the school gates. The same group of boys waited for him by the lockers, ready to push him, call him names, and steal his lunch. Teachers either looked the other way or told him to toughen up. Mason felt invisible, like his pain didn't matter to anyone. Each step he took down the hall felt heavier than the last. The world had become a place of fear and shame for him. At lunch, Mason would sit alone at the farthest table, poking at the food he barely touched. Sometimes he imagined being invisible, not so he could hide, but so no one would notice him enough to hurt him. His only moments of peace came when he was back home, locked in his room, drawing fantasy worlds where he was a hero, strong and fearless. But when he put the pencil down, reality came crashing back. His parents were kind but busy. They noticed he was sad, but he always said, "I'm fine." He didn't want them worrying or coming to school and making things worse. The truth was Mason didn't believe anything could change. The bullying wasn't just words and bruises anymore. It had become who he was, a target, a ghost. One afternoon, after a particularly bad day, Mason sat on the steps outside his house, trying not to cry. That's when he heard the soft whine behind him. He turned around and saw a thin, scruffy dog with tired eyes and a wagging tail. Mason reached out his hand slowly. The dog licked his fingers and sat beside him. It was the first warm touch he'd felt in weeks. He looked into the dog's eyes and smiled for the first time in days. "Where did you come from?" he whispered. The dog didn't answer, but it didn't leave either. Mason named him Chance because for the first time in a long time, that's what he felt he had. Mason brought Chance into the house cautiously, expecting his parents to say no. But when they saw the muddy, tired pup curled at Mason's feet, something softened in their faces. "He followed me home," Mason said, eyes hopeful. After a moment of silence, his mother nodded. "Let's get him cleaned up." That night, Chance slept at the foot of Mason's bed, his warm body a quiet comfort. Over the next few days, Chance became more than just a pet. He became Mason's shadow, his companion and his shield. Wherever Mason went, Chance followed. In the backyard, Chance would leap around with bursts of joy, trying to get Mason to laugh. And when Mason cried silently at night, Chance would rest his head on Mason's chest and stay still until he fell asleep. It was like the dog could feel his pain and carry part of it. Something changed in Mason too. He started waking up earlier, just to take Chance on long walks. People on the street began to smile at them. Chance had a strange confidence, proud but calm. With Chance by his side, Mason stood a little taller, looked people in the eye more. At the park, when other kids approached to pet the dog, Mason found himself smiling and answering their questions. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. Chance also had a mysterious kind of intelligence. He seemed to know when someone meant harm. One day, when a group of older boys laughed at Mason in the street, Chance stepped between them, growled low and deep, and stared until they backed off. Mason didn't say a word, but inside he felt something rise, not fear, but power. That night, Mason hugged Chance tightly. "You're more than a dog," he whispered. "You're my best friend. You saved me." The quiet room held the words like a secret, and Chance licked his cheek gently as if to say, "I know." With Chance walking beside him, Mason began to face school differently. The fear was still there, but it didn't control him anymore. The bullies still tried to taunt him, but Mason's silence now felt unshakable, almost defiant. He didn't flinch when they threw words at him. He didn't cower when they shoved him in the hallway. He would simply brush himself off and walk away, his eyes steady. Something about him had changed, and people noticed. Word spread quickly that Mason had a dog who never left his side after school. Rumors began to swirl. "That dog's wild. I heard it growled at Jason and made him run off." Mason's not afraid anymore. Even the bullies started hesitating, unsure of how far they could go. The power they once had over him seemed to be slipping. Some began to ignore him altogether, which for Mason was a victory. Outside school, Mason started joining activities he had never dared try before. He went to the local library for a drawing club and made a couple of quiet friends who shared his love for comics. He signed up for an art contest and worked on a project every night, with Chance curled up at his feet. Every pencil stroke felt like he was rewriting his story, one where he wasn't the victim, but the main character. His parents began to see the light coming back into him. His mother would pause outside his room and listen to him laugh while talking to Chance. His father started coming home earlier to help with homework and to walk Chance with Mason in the evenings. The dog had not only changed Mason, but the family too. They were bonding again, healing in ways none of them had expected. And then something incredible happened. The school announced a Pet Hero Day, a chance for students to bring their pets and share their stories. Mason's hands trembled when he read the flyer. He looked at Chance. "Maybe it's time they heard my story," he said quietly. Chance wagged his tail in agreement. Pet Hero Day arrived on a bright Friday morning. Students buzzed with excitement, carrying cats in carriers, dogs on leashes, and even a few hamsters in cages. Mason stood at the edge of the school lawn with Chance calmly sitting by his side, wearing a simple red bandana around his neck. Mason's hands were cold with nerves, but Chance pressed against his leg gently, grounding him. This wasn't just show and tell. For Mason, it was his turning point. When it was Mason's turn to speak, the crowd grew unusually quiet. Not many people had heard him say more than a few words in the past year. He stepped forward, took a shaky breath, and looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some doubtful, and some cruel. But then he looked down at Chance, who stared back with calm eyes. Mason began. "This is Chance. He's not just my dog. He's the reason I'm still standing." He spoke slowly, honestly. He told them about the bullying, the name-calling, the isolation, the fear, the loneliness. And then one day this dog showed up on my doorstep. I didn't know it then, but he came to save me. He made me feel like I mattered. As he spoke, a strange silence filled the air, the kind that comes when people know they're hearing the truth. Mason's voice was not loud, but it was strong. He didn't fight my battles for me. He made me believe I could fight them myself. When Mason finished, there was a long pause. Then one of the teachers started clapping. Slowly, others followed. A few students stood. Even one of the boys who used to tease Mason the worst clapped, head slightly bowed. The applause grew louder. Mason didn't smile, not yet, but something inside him lifted, something that had been buried under fear for far too long. That day, Mason didn't go back to being the old version of himself. Instead, he walked through the crowd like someone who belonged. Chance trotted beside him, tail wagging proudly. Mason had shared his truth, and instead of judgment, he had found understanding. His story had shaken something awake in everyone who heard it. After Pet Hero Day, everything shifted. Students who had never spoken to Mason before began greeting him in the halls. Some asked about Chance, others shared their own stories of feeling lonely or afraid. The bullying didn't magically disappear, but its grip on Mason's life loosened. Even the worst of his tormentors seemed unsure of themselves now, as if Mason's courage had made them question their cruelty. Chance became something of a legend around town. Kids would wave when they saw him on walks. Strangers would ask if he was the dog from the school speech. Local newspapers picked up the story, and Mason and Chance were even invited to speak at a nearby youth center. For a boy who once thought he had no voice, Mason now found people leaning in to listen. At home, Mason kept drawing. His latest sketchbook was filled with comics of a boy and his brave dog who faced monsters, some real, some imagined, and always came out stronger. He started posting his art online, and to his surprise, people responded with messages of encouragement and admiration. One message read, "Your story helped me tell my parents about my bullying. Thank you." Mason realized that sharing his pain had helped others find their voice too. Chance stayed at Mason's side through it all. Rain or shine, fear or triumph, he was there, a silent protector and faithful friend. When Mason won first prize in the local youth art contest, he walked on stage holding the ribbon in one hand and Chance's leash in the other. He looked into the cheering crowd, not with pride, but with peace. He had made it through the storm. Years later, Long after Chance passed peacefully in his sleep, Mason visited schools talking to kids about courage, kindness, and the power of one loyal companion. He would always end with the same words. I thought I needed someone to fight for. Me. But what I needed was someone to believe in me, and a dog who never let me forget I was worth fighting for.